All right. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining our latest Twitter space. I'm excited today to be joined by a group of people from DappHaus. So we'll get into a lot of who DappHaus is and what they work on. But really short, they're a shop out of Canada that brings design, development, innovation to and just generally expertise to projects across Web3. They touch in metaverse games, NFTs, and they do a lot of really interesting projects. They have a pretty cool portfolio of projects in the past. They have a number of projects that I know they're working on right now, and we'll see which ones they can share with us today. And on top of that, they've been an awesome early partner of Tableland, really helping us vet early ideas around the protocol and what we were building, and now trying to build some early proof of concepts and projects on Tableland that we'll get into at the end. I'm joined by three of their team, Wilbur, Corey, and Ben, and they bucked my assumption that they were purely a Canadian shop, actually, by being spread out all over. But yeah, I'm excited to talk to them and hear where they think the metaverse, gaming, and Web3 are all headed, and what kind of innovations we may unlock as we go there. So yeah, welcome, guys.
Thank you.
I think maybe a nice place to always start these conversations, because I feel like the people that join Twitter Spaces aren't necessarily going to be familiar with either of us, but I always think it's nice to give a bit of audience calibration. So maybe could we start with the DappHaus calibration, and could one of you maybe just share a bit more about who DappHaus is and what kinds of things you work on?
Sure thing. Why don't I go ahead and perhaps give a little bit of a splash intro, and I can also toss the ball over to yourself, Corey, after to add a bit of detail. But really, from our end, yeah, really, we're a full stack software development agency. Been around for a while. You kind of working on traditional media, and at this point in time as well, becoming a large player in the Toronto Web3 services space. And really kind of what we work around is a lot of game and gamification, AR, VR, XR experiences, as well as simulations, virtualized environments. A lot of this is for example, virtualizing certain tools for training in different industries. Of course, the good old classic database and application server stuff. And, just say it again, decentralized applications in Decentraland, a lot of stuff in Polygon, and much more. I think that Corey can touch on that aspect as well.
Yeah, really, we've been around for 13 years, developing XR type applications for architecture, engineering, construction, and mining type of applications. And through our work in XR, we saw metaverse as a great distribution platform for the technology we were already making. So with a few Bluebird clients, we got pushed pretty heavily into the Web3 space, working on Parallel Life, and many other things, which I'm sure we'll get into. So I'm the VP of Web3 technology at DappHaus, and I'm focused very broadly on all of our Web3 offerings, whether those be ledger solutions, metaverse, etc. So I'm also helping to kind of solutions architect stuff for our client base and to help them strategize as to how can Web3 technology bolster their current offering, or how can they extend into the Web3 space?
My role or title at DappHaus is the Director of Development, and that's kind of multifaceted role. Really, a lot of it is I work on a lot of coordination on our different departments, being from administration, business development, to our developers directly. We also have a creative team, more so traditional backend development team, and whatnot. So kind of bringing it all together. Also, do a lot of one-on-ones with all our teams every day. Make sure everyone's learning and growing.
Yeah, I'm always really curious too, because different projects and organizations all have arrived at Web3 in through different channels, and so how did this how did the whole org of DappHaus sort of arrive at Web3 and start tackling those projects, and what really drew you to this domain?
Sure
yeah,
thing.
go ahead.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think, just alluding to like definitely the first bit of what we're talking about in terms of what we do. I think we mentioned quite a few things, and that's kind of the traditional development. And I think for one way to put it is we came from a very traditional sort of delivery oriented organization, very much like X or Y projects or initiatives. And really, as you touched on as well, within our group ourselves, we're just a bunch of we got a lot of different people excited about very different aspects of technology. I think just in general, being technologists, just the whole blockchain stuff as it kind of rose starting, early 2015, 14, 15 or so, getting a bit of steam, we're kind of, a lot of us were following, dipping our toes into crypto here and there or experimenting with a framework or a library. And, that kind of sat with us, and we had a lot of the traditional experience doing like gamification and working with sort of enterprise organizations. So really, I really feel like it's a kind of a right place, right time sort of thing where number one, our interest and our abilities in this, that's kind of been sitting in the background. There's definitely a demand now in the industry for these types of services. And the reality is that they do integrate with the traditional things. For example, you probably, especially in gaming, the gaming engines, will, yeah, I won't say too much, but it's if you're a WebSocket decentralized server provider, hit us up. I think that's one way to put it. That's another core piece of technology that's centralized, but can it be decentralized, whatnot? You'll probably know we're quite consumer based as well. We like to adapt and adopt technologies to produce them for the consumer level. Yeah, and finally, there's definitely a lot of with that, right? Like just the interest in all these things. There's definitely a lot of partnerships with these new Web3 focused groups like yourself in Tableland, Parcel Party, which I can ask Corey to kind of touch on a bit more, as well as very interesting games such as I think the big one from us that we've been kind of hiding under a rock and chipping away at is the parallel trading card game NFT. So maybe Corey, I kind of interrupted you. Did you want to talk a bit more about the partnerships at all, or?
Sure, yeah. So Parcel Party is a company of my own creation that I used, again, as Wilbur said, we all had kind of our pet projects in the Web3 space. So mine was exploring the metaverse because, as I said, we were already building XR training applications, and I thought, what a great distribution platform for this technology. So, the best way to learn is by doing. And so I got involved with the community and been running a metaverse events company that kind of grew its own legs and became its own entity. So, DappHaus is the delivery partner associated with that. And we've done some fairly major activations, including the biggest event in Decentraland history, which was Absolute Land in Coachella. We had 21,000 people over 6 days at that experience. So, yeah, we've partnered with DappHaus to better be able to support the enterprises who are looking to do these types of activations. The scale of these projects are getting much bigger, and we just needed more horsepower. And actually, we somewhat of a merger, really, because that's how we found Ben. Ben and I were working on this together for some months, and DappHaus has started to absorb all the staff and all the decentralized people that I had pulled in to work with. So we are somewhat centralizing under that banner. But yeah, it was a lot of these partnerships, and our staff a lot of this was born in the metaverse and Web3 space.
That's cool. I want to dig a little bit more into Parcel Party for sure. Backing up a bit though to DappHaus, I'm curious if any of you know what kind of the first project in Web3 looked like, or it even could be the first project that's still interesting. I don't know, just to give people sort of an anchor in time of what you were thinking about when you first dipped your toes into the space.
Oh boy.
Yeah,
I guess it really depends on if it's kind of personal experimentation or if it's more so really kind of, let's call it the production level stuff, right?
Well, try to give a production level, because I have kind of a follow-on question to that. Mm-hmm. if you can think of any, but if not, a personal is fine.
Oh, from our end, I think pretty much coming in shortly for sure. We've been working on essentially a bit of a longer story, which we'll get into, but we've been definitely working on getting sort of a game, a very light platform, I guess, into Decentraland. And we kind of been working kind of in the background. The pet project would be, our CTO Joey and I, awesome guy, would also, say, hey, if you're gonna take a meeting with me on the weekend, I'm going to make you work. Let me at least take you out for some food or something, so it'll be a little more casual. So, we're kind of sitting around and having lunch. Dim sum's amazing in Toronto, so there's definitely a lot of really awesome choices there. And it's kind of like around then where a lot of these things were converging. We had also gotten signed on with Parallel at that point in terms of our first big collaboration within the space. And we're discussing actually for ourselves, like how do we, expand upon it? Like a client is a client, or sorry, a partnership is a partnership. But what about us? What about our products? What about our people and learning and getting into the space? So really, we're kind of chatting around like for this, and Joey was saying, oh, why, dim sum, like fighting dim sum or something. And, I go home later that day and kind of drew a few cartoon sketches of dim sum with cute faces on it, and decided, hey, that was pretty fun. That kind of one thing led to another. That kind of sat quote unquote dormant for a bit. We did get to meet Ben, and Ben, got to put up with my very nitpicky directions about how these cute little dim sum anime characters should look. So, we got them colorized, looking good and whatnot. No real technology at this point, because we were thinking, hey, what do we do first? Do we make NFTs with these guys and go down the route of selling NFTs? Well, I mean, we could, but is it really our boat? We're more development agency. Maybe we should be focusing on like showing the technology or the expansions, or putting some technology in place, right? So really with like a few pieces set in place, like meeting Ben, having this sort of little back pocket creative concept just sitting around, nothing official at this point, kind of like secret stuff. And really at a certain point, we started to come through and get more, I guess, budget, let's call it, from an organizational standpoint, to perform research and development into the space. And basically I quote unquote sneakily took that as an opportunity to say, hi, why don't we do a research and development project where we take this Decentraland experience and connection we have, and let us, connected with something of our own creation, not just like, adapting or putting a client work. And we're working to essentially release very soon, actually in mid-fall, our first game in Decentraland on a Decentraland platform, and from our own creation. It's a small one, but I think it'll be pretty delightful. And ultimately, I say that with a pun, because for one thing is when you do research and development, you got to kind of answer to, hey, well, what came out of it? So ultimately, putting a lot of these small pieces that we need to, like building out a game server, building out a platform, and having this workflow of integrating with the mana payment system to et cetera, it kind of became a very light platform for that we thought of, like, if we want to do it again, we could kind of take these pieces, change a few databases and whatnot, and slowly evolve it into a more and more, robust tool, adding it on. And at this point, we're going to be releasing the pilot project, which is Dim Sum Heroes in Fall. And I think to the development community, we're going to be also working to refine that platform and hopefully offer it both as a service to other clients, or we'll have to see, maybe we get some people interested in the platform, perhaps one way or another. The plan,
cool.
Again, there's many streams. Sorry, I've taken the mic for a bit long. So.
No, it's great. Actually, you answered the question I was going to have next, which is more around this idea that I'm seeing quite a lot, which are organizations that are working in this space that do a lot of client work or grant-based work, all the while figuring out what their unique, their unique delivery is in the space. Like, where can they deliver value and become their own sustainable project outside of client work? And that seems to be the journey that you've been on yourself, using all these projects that you've been taking on as sort of learning experiences. Also, in everything that you said, there's actually quite a lot to unpack for people that are listening. I heard you drop the word mana in there for a second. So let's back up a little bit. And you were saying in your research and development, you were putting these pieces together. There's one thing that I know you did, which is earlier this year, you bought a plot in Decentraland. I imagine that was part of that flow, sort of dipping your toe into Decentraland and seeing. Could you maybe explain what the thinking was behind buying that plot as an organization like DappHaus, and what you imagined doing with it, and what you think you'll still do with it now that you have it?
Well, I think definitely, what triggered the building out of it definitely was the partnership with Parcel Party, and just seeing, a lot of clients come in, such as things that you would imagine are quite just traditional, like let's say a brick and mortar lawyer agency approached us to say, hey, we want to be in the space, and for now we want a building, we want it to be there. And just seeing that really triggered in our mind to say, hey, well, on our end, we've been building all of this stuff for everybody. So, we even have this sort of project in our back pocket. Like, we kind of need land. Like, we want to have a little area to kind of showcase our goods, so to speak, right? And also have a bit of fun there, potentially. So yeah.
Okay, so that's cool. So the collaboration with these other two around Parcel Party had already been happening at that point. Maybe this is a good moment to dig to sort of unpack a bit what Parcel Party is and how it was created, and how that sort of merges going forward. How are you thinking about these virtual spaces? Maybe that's a good one for you, Corey. Like, where does Parcel Party come from, and like, why are people using it? What gets them into the decentralized metaverses and collaborating or building or partying there, whatever it is?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting thing, because you actually have to look at what is a Decentraland plot, or what is one of these parcels in a digital, it's called a virtual world platform. In my opinion, it's not really going to matter where your solution is hosted. Like, I mean, similar to the Web2 space, like, does anybody care that where you built your website, Wix, Squarespace, GoDaddy or WordPress? Like, I don't think that's going to be, it's really, what can you do with that space? So I think it's interesting, because what we've done is essentially paid, whatever that flat fee was for the land, for 10 megabytes of data storage indefinitely in a 16 meter by 16 meter 3D space, right? You get some SDK, you get some development tools, but that's ostensibly what it is, right? As opposed to a SaaS model where I'm paying somebody monthly to host my website, right? So I think at the core of it, that's really what this technology is, right? But there is a culture that's kind of developing, especially around the early adopters of the DeFi communities, that we really wanted to tap into. So I think it's a more interesting narrative to develop these things in a decentralized platform than anywhere else. Parcel Party really is focused on mid-market and onboarding mid-market and enterprise companies into the space. And the reason for that is we think that's going to help with mainstream adoption. They bring their own audiences. And so really, as I said before, most of the people we're dealing with are consultancies, or the Madison Avenue marketing agencies. And those types of clients were looking for a more formal process that the DeFi communities just really couldn't give them, right? Like, the risk assessment of the space is not fantastic. How do we get these projects done? So really, the partnership with DappHaus was to add horsepower to this whole thing, to be able to scale these solutions, right? If we're doing a 2x2 build, well, Ben can do that. We can code it. But now if we're talking about 100 parcels with different gamification aspects and different web socketing and multiple streams, and there's all sorts of stuff that we needed horsepower to start to develop those things out. So that was the reason for it. I think the metaverse right now it's not a mature marketplace. I mean, I caution most of our clients into looking at ROI in the space. I think it's a new marketing channel, just like social media was. You have your TikToks and you have Insta and you have all those different things. But I think it's a fantastic tool for marketing and getting your brand out there and giving deeper, more immersive experiences to your client base, right? So that's what I'm really seeing the metaverse as right now. It should be bolstering your core offering. You don't necessarily need to start up something brand new from scratch. How does this technology support what you're currently doing as a business, right? So that's the lens that we're kind of looking.
Yeah, and so with that lens, what are some of the ways that users or kind of, I'd imagine DappHaus clients or Parcel Party users, not the end consumer, how are they getting the end consumer into these events and spaces? Like, what is the hook that's drawing people to come interact right now?
I mean, I think metaverse is just a buzzword. This is a lot
Yeah.
of marketing jargon for sure. I mean, I think it's a pretty loose definition as to what even the metaverse is, but I think most people are looking for a PR story just to be early movers into this space, right? Or to explore and do their own R&D, just to figure out how is this going to mature? How can we use this as an organization, right? So.
Hmm. Well, maybe a good moment to get Ben here. I hear that you're online now. So Ben, maybe share a bit who you are. And then the first question I have for you is, what are the technical challenges right now building real technology on top of the virtual world sort of stack? What sorts of things are either keeping you up at night, or are you thinking need solutions to make this a better development sort of experience?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Ben. I'm the technical design lead at DappHaus. I do quite a bit of everything from 3D to a bit of SDK, a bit of C++, C#, Unity, Unreal, whatever the project requires. And yeah, the biggest challenge right now would definitely be the current, limitations of the softwares. All the different platforms that are out there have their various limitations of what you can and can't achieve. And especially when you're talking on a creative and artistic level, you go into it saying, I've got this piece of land. I want to build something absolutely epic and beautiful on it. And then you go look at the lists of all the restrictions, how many tries are we allowed in the scene in terms of mesh count, how many objects. All those things are quite frankly a huge challenge right now, because if we can get the server architecture to a place where we can handle a lot more, if we can get the server architecture to a place where we can handle a lot more, then that it'll kind of strip that limitation away from us. We can actually really build some incredible environments, absolutely mind-blowing environments. So for me, that's one of the biggest challenges is trying to take a client's vision or my own vision or our own project visions within DappHaus and actually make them functional and viable within the platform, the given platform that we're working in.
Yeah.
But at the same time, still keep that fidelity that we would like to have out of it.
Do you see any areas where those limitations seem to exist in the platforms and in the networks? Do you see any any areas where builders are consistently hacking around the edge to make something possible that doesn't necessarily seem possible or straightforward in the protocol or the stack themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. Also, because it's such a new emerging, market and emerging tech, a lot of the companies like Decentraland, for example, are still only building all their reference material, all the API libraries, all those things that we would need to actually know what we're doing. So a lot of it can be a bit of an R&D process. You jump in and it's hours of testing what you can, trying to leverage the system as best as you can.
Sometimes it's very lighthearted, if I may interject, as to like those
things
too.
Sure,
like Ben,
sure.
Ben, if I were to maybe throw something over, I recall you showing me the hats that you made for the Deaf Squad, and there was a little bit of hacking around there with respect to the fade cut, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the Deaf Squad were wearable NFTs in Decentraland for folks,
correct,
right? So
correct.
Explain that one a bit.
So basically, Dev Squad have their iconic jacket and cap, and for the cap in Decentraland, you have to include hair in hats and caps. You can't just submit the hat on it. So otherwise, the meshes will either be inside each other, or you'll have a bald character with a hat. So you have to put the hair into the hat. And what they requested was a high fade, which is a classic part of the Dev Squad look. And there's been a few alpha transparent hairstyles, done in Decentraland, especially at that time. Everything was all very solid. And I noticed that, there's a few quirks with the pipeline that Decentraland uses, because it is the GLTF pipeline. However, you can't use normal maps and roughness maps on wearables. You can use them in scenes, but you can't use them in wearables. And that itself, creates another limitation of how do I accurately get lighting and reflections and actually make this thing great. But sorry, revert back to what you had just asked me. Sorry about that.
Particularly, I was curious about where developers are finding like kind of hacks or innovative solutions that make things possible that don't seem straightforward. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. So based on that, if you test your material shader for Decentraland wearables, you'll notice that certain things don't always work out the way they would work out in the standard sense. And alpha transparency is one of those things as well, especially if you're not, well-versed in making your own, alpha maps and that kind of thing. So there's a couple of ways you can hack to get a real pretty easy, transparent, transparency-based texture for hair or for anything. And I do think once more people start using techniques like that, you'll start seeing a lot more of that kind of stuff coming onto the marketplace. And there's creativity that can go into that. With a technique like that, you can create any hairstyle you want.
That's cool. That's exactly what I was getting to, because it feels like with a lot of these emerging technologies, and I'm kind of speaking to the people that listen to our spaces a lot, they're looking for where innovations can happen. And if you just look at the way existing builders are creating these hacks, you can find those like pain points that are waiting to be solved with interesting new approaches or solutions. So it's really interesting. So just the advanced designs of characters even sounds really challenging, but like has solutions. So that's very cool.
Yeah, 100%. Another little kind of situation that people often find themselves when they first start creating is that everything's very flat. You can't use normal maps and roughness maps to get that really nice lighting. So another little hack that we all use is that we do combined bakes, and we bake fake lighting and shadowing into our diffuse maps. So that way we can have, for example, a shiny suit armor, but there's no light source in Decentraland that it's using to pick that up. It's all just fake baked into that texture, which is really cool. Another way of circumventing the limitations.
Yeah, it's interesting. What are some of the tools in that pipeline that you use?
Mostly Blender. In fact, it's very similar to what the developers of Decentraland use. It's Blender and Unity. That's the two main suites there. Create all the 3D and all our animation and texturing in Blender. There are a lot of people as well who use Substance Painter in terms of texturing their models and creating those combined bakes. And Unity is great because the DappHaus itself has a lot of Unity developers in it, and Decentraland is built on Unity. So there's a lot of connection points there that just make sense.
Yeah, makes sense. We hear Unity coming up in a lot of conversations lately. It seems like there's still a lot more that's going to be done in Web3 with that platform. So really interesting. So, okay, now maybe jumping a bit or bridging up to this story of dim sum heroes and trying to actually build some of your own developer tooling to enable this. One thing about dim sum heroes, so for those of you that might not have caught that, Wilbur was sharing a bit about this dim sum idea. And I was just wondering, or I'm particularly interested in this merging that you're seeing between metaverse or specifically these virtual worlds and Decentraland and gamification. So you see this seems to be your interest and your focus in building some developer tooling and a new platform for people to launch things more quickly are some of the bounds of games. And we're actually like-minded. We see there's just like such amazing potential for games in this space still that are sort of unexplored. I'm curious if you have any kind of insights there as to why you see games as particularly interesting in virtual worlds, and like what are some of the opportunities there that you think organizations are going to go after?
Yeah, I think ultimately, like, kind of to say, like, in terms of convergence of the Web3s and games, I think a big aspect of it, even before we talked about, like, the terminology, I think, in the media and in the general consensus is that like the hardcore, quote unquote, hardcore gamers, people who are still kind of playing on like the older MMOs or whatnot, and these communities, these social communities that are kind of like our first generation metaverses or whatever we want to brand them. The culture really is very similar, right? Like whether it's within the game or outside of it, you know, there's this concept of like collecting and trading culture. You know, it like within the game, outside the game, you know, rare things, not rare things, fun things, things that look cool or look different, you know. So that aspect kind of existed, and the aspect of now trying to extend that ownership or to talk about that ownership in a different way, really, that's one convergence, right? That's one very big technological cultural convergence. And from a technological standpoint, you know, or a methodology of accounting for all of that, that really is convergence as well. And maybe to put the cherry on top, there's this notion of maybe the concept is decentralized persistence, right? The idea that, you know, we build these systems so that they persist without needing a centralized source of mechanic to continue to process them. And you know, like one nostalgia aspect is that a lot of people will look back to these older metaverses, let's even use the term now, older worlds that they've been in, and kind of think, hey, like, is it still alive? Is it still around? And this nostalgia comes back to say, hey, well, what if we could make it more persistent? What are the ways to do that? So I think that's really kind of like these spiritual and technological factors, in my opinion, that really are pulling people together. It's also a little bit of a trap, but I think you know, it's I think that's why it's going in that direction as well.
Yeah. You mentioned really briefly in one of the introductions the project, the parallel trading cards. Could you maybe share a bit about that and the game, even the game mechanic that's being used for the trading?
Yeah, so I can definitely share a little bit of details. It's definitely in development at the moment, and so I'll have to watch, you know, how I phrase things. Especially, I think one aspect that I have to be, we're all very sensitive about is that there is a certain aspect of in crypto markets, what's the term again? Prospecting, right? Prospecting. So like it could even go down to the detail of like, oh, this card has these abilities or something. Like I can't say that obviously, because it's like, hey, well, that could change someone's value or worth, and then in the future that may or may not be the case, because it's all, you know, a layer on top of the NFTs is the game, right? So maybe to share that, you know, we've been working on a game with Parallel Inc. And we've become, I guess, working very closely together. They came to us with the concept of a game, of a trading card game, as well as, you know, their established audience of amazing, I guess, amazing audience and group, you know, that's very enthusiastic about it. And basically, you know, in terms of like our organization, we had a lot of, you know, personal interest in video games. Like a lot of times when we would play Magic, or just even traditional like Magic the Gathering, kind of on Friday afternoons and stuff, and you know, play through, chat. And so it's kind of within our group. And I think when we started chatting it out, they kind of understood that, you know, given our experience in the past with more traditional things like interactive media and whatnot, that yeah, we could do this. Like we knew the game rules, we know how to program this aspect of servers and whatnot, right? So kind of really going into it, you know, I think the high level is that it is indeed a trading card game. Maybe some deadpan jokes. There will be stats. There will be numbers. There are things. I guess no. On their website, they actually have some information. There are certain cards. You know, they're called units. They're more relatable to like the cards that persist on field in concept and theory. You know, there are other aspects of it, upgrading relics, instant effects. So you've got the classic slew of card things with a little bit of a twist in terms of various mechanics as well. Actually, I read the FAQ before jumping on here to make sure I didn't
No, you can talk about there. Yeah. Tell me something. Is there a timeline for folks to be aware of for this project? Is that public?
Yeah. I think it's essentially like at right now, like it's all, you know, we have kind of like a version that actually plays through with all the cards implemented. You know, art's kind of coming through, and I think the latest timeline I've received is that they do want to release a some beta version. It may not include like ownership aspects of it. There's a little bit of development, of which I can get into as well. That's actually the blockchain and the NFT integration aspect, which I can speak about as well. But yeah, like
Yeah.
you know,
I guess really quickly, do you know which blockchain it will be released on?
I can't really say necessarily in terms of that. But I can refer you to they do have a white paper actually on their page, and the system that they're building out is the Echelon sidechain essentially, which we will be integrating with essentially to provide you know how it goes, right? You play through games. If you do X or Y missions or quests, you get rewards. So you kind of need to have a big data analytics sort of system to kind of track, hey, like in this game you did indeed play this card, so
Nice.
you get one check on your thing, and then your Echelon reward profile will start to accumulate, for example, this currency, right, for in-game rewards.
Any good so kind of back to that role of DappHaus building out some of these projects for other clients. Are there any good lessons or learnings you had building this project around games on the blockchain?
Well, I guess surprisingly for something like this one, lessons learned. I mean, things have been moving quite smoothly. It seems strange, like it's almost just like another project. I think that I feel like maybe we've learned, yeah, we've learned a lot of lessons in the past. I will tell you that. Yeah. So maybe that's why there have been a few less sort of collisions or of any sort. But I think if I were to emphasize something, it really is the collaboration that is the most important. Having a general plan, because there's so many different aspects, right? You've got the game engine, you've got the telemetrics out to the rewarding system, then you've got the game client. You have to make sure the art gets in, and there's a whole creative team that wants to make this look good, and everybody's kind of working towards the same vision. So it really is an aspect of, like, number one, coordination, collaboration, communication, and I would say as well, yeah, it's just been a great experience. I think that's the way to put it.
Yeah, I think the Web3 development experience has just moved so quickly. But yeah, I think the social side of it, the what is the saying? It's the failure to plan is the plan to fail. That's always it with the collaborations, right? Cool. So then I imagine that this sort of the gamification and the NFT side of that has also been bleeding into your thinking on your sort of skunkworks secret project. So maybe it's time to unpack that a bit. Like, what can you share about the solution that you're hoping to provide to the community with what you're building there?
Right. Oh, so I guess in terms of I'll have to actually, because there's a few projects in play, but so I'll have to kind of get my ducks in a row. But I think to put it, there is one skunkworks project, again, another gamification one. I think this one, it's pretty classic. We're going to build a pretty light game that everyone will probably enjoy playing. But I think the interesting aspect is that a lot of times, the way, let's say, NFTs work is that they kind of come into you get them, and then kind of they may accrue value, they may be prospected in terms of value. But for this one, there's definitely, I think, a lot of people holding on to certain NFTs that were maybe not expecting them to be used in certain ways, might be surprised to get something from it, and I think that's going to come more and more.
So adding new utility to existing NFTs.
Yeah, to NFTs that already exist, within certain platforms. Some people may have just collected it because it was something that they have gotten, or they just came across and they liked it, and they bought it when it was like prices going up and down. Maybe they don't have any intention of trading or whatnot. But I would say that these NFTs were not necessarily created with prospect in mind. Like, a lot of times, sometimes NFTs will be created because of this game or of this thing that they want to kind of bring you into, and you can buy like a plot of land or a specific item. I think this one's interesting because it takes existing ones that may not have had that expectation.
Yeah, that's a really great insight, because there's hundreds, if not thousands, of interesting NFT communities that are kind of at their final state until new
Mhm.
innovations come along that can unlock exactly what you're talking about, new opportunities for collaboration or usage or communication or whatever it is. Actually, that's a lot of our thinking behind Tableland, is that idea of we can actually provide creators with new tools to extend what they're doing with their NFTs. We don't say what kinds of extensions, we just say how you can use Tableland to connect that original data with new data in interesting ways, even if you're not building a project from scratch. So another one that we're very like-minded with you there. Cool. And is that the same then? Or like you were saying, you have multiple projects kind of, is that the same as the work that you're imagining in virtual worlds, or is that a different?
Yeah, so with respect to that one, so that's kind of like a standalone, and that would be on a more traditional platform, per se, like the build for it. And I think maybe you're referring to kind of the Delight platform that we were kind of, using to pilot the Decentraland. So yeah, I think with respect to that, I think at this moment, and I guess we can definitely share this, but we do have the traditional engine available on the LAMP stack with the connection at this point for Decentraland. But moving forward,
so real quick, because I don't know if we said it actually very concisely for folks, what will the Delight platform enable for a user?
So right now, and especially for the Decentraland based games, it will basically, it has some immediate out of the box tools that either need a bit of configuration or immediately will work for you. So at its core, basically, it will create a database for you for accounting for every user that comes in. So every user, that is on Decentraland will either be a guest user with sort of like a guest wallet associated with them, or that will be, an actual user with their actual wallet and stuff, right? So, the system as how it works right now is like when you hit the plot of land or when you decide to participate in the game, it begins by automatically like creating these accounts and beginning to create that basic process of linking a traditional, let's say, account and linking to a wallet. Very much like if you go on OpenSea, it's a traditional app, you link your wallet and bam, X or Y or Z. So it's kind of like we're creating these containers now that allow us to either keep score, keep profile information, and have persistent information, and it's directly linked to immediately, almost automatically upon the person reaching the parcel of land. So that's one aspect of it. I think the second aspect of it is we have a very basic transaction system as well. So basically any types of transactions for mana, we've hooked it up in our system to be kind of like okay, you get 5 free plays a day, and then you can kind of get more of them if you want by paying a very small sum of, I guess, I wonder if we should make it lower than 1 mana, but at the moment in testing, it's set to 1 mana.
Question though, I guess back to influences from existing projects, how much Parcel Party thinking goes into this? Is this something that you would have used to build out the original Parcel Party, or is there like future versions of that platform you see that would leverage this kind of new stack?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like the work in particular that Wilbur and team have done with web socketing is enabled a whole range of possibilities that we didn't have before. Like Ben had alluded to earlier, you get 10 megabytes of data storage per parcel. 10 megabytes, right? And we're also talking about a 10,000 try count per parcel, right? So, the work that these guys have done with web socketing and being able to host stuff not in, offline, let's say, or somewhere else is allowed us to plug in all sorts of new capabilities. So yeah, definitely. Absolutely. Especially in particular around gamification, you guys did some amazing work around, the realms and queuing up multiplayer matches and all sorts of crazy stuff that was not, that's pretty advanced, at least for the space and the platform that we're leveraging, right? That's, that type of stuff was not, I didn't even think it was possible until these guys got a hold of it. So
yeah, maybe to talk a little bit more on that detail. It's kind of like to kind of explain it, and it's not. It seems like it's very it's not a big deal, especially when we talk about the more traditional space with a lot of tools that are pre-built to help with this. Like, you know, in PlayFab, you have the mirror through Unity that lets you kind of help. It's a platform to help you sync up game states between two things, right? To give you an example, it's kind of like this, you know, if I were on Decentraland right now, you know, I can definitely see everybody walk around. But if I were to make a random button that says, if I press this button, the box kind of moves in a little bit of a circle. I'll press that button and it'll move in a circle for me. But the question is, it will actually, if you just did like the hello world, it wouldn't move in the circle for everybody else on that parcel. And that's because they're not synchronized, right? Like you're only telling one game client to do the one thing. So the whole deal with WebSockets as an analogy is that it's kind of like a chat room that's very, very responsive. And instead of chat messages, you have, you know, commands instead. So, you know, we had to abstract a simple moving of a cube to so that it is a chat message that goes out to every client when I do it, and then so on. So that was one aspect, because what we really wanted to demonstrate was something called a shared game state. You know, the whole premise, I think, of this Dim Sum Heroes game is kind of like a crane game where, you know, sometimes you can grab the reward and it'll be right in front of the hole, but you didn't get it. So someone else is going to swoop in and get it from you. But for that to happen, it needs to be shared, right? Everybody needs to be playing on the game, same field. So, you know, that was the first thing that, you know, we built out, was just like a WebSocket and a client interfacing to get that game state synced. And the second aspect that isn't considered is a lot of times, you know, again, in Decentraland, just because it's not mature, you run in and you play a game, but that's like a one player instant. Like I go up to a cabinet and I'll press start and I'm kind of doing the thing. 50 people could be waiting at the same cabinet and kind of doing their own thing, which is fine. That might be a specific game design. But in ours, since, you know, only one person's kind of operating the crane at a time, the second problem is queuing. That seems very basic, right? Like you wait in line and for your turn, but you know, you get a database, you get a wait list, you have a server that kind of runs through each of those and tells you whose turn is whose, who ran out of time, who decided to quit early and change. So there's a whole life cycle around queuing and getting people into the match. Right now it's used for single player, but I don't see why we couldn't quickly adopt this technology to be matchmaking for like a one-on-one or a 4-person group. It's the same logic. You got to pile people up in a logical order, whether there's certain, certain functions that you want to apply before that. So
it reminds me of Linux development. You know, you want a sound driver, go build it. You know, like it's like
pretty much, yeah. Like and then you go to the,
you know,
yeah, we go to the PlayFab
there.
world.
Yeah.
We go on the other side. I step to the other side of the fence, and Dave, one of our senior developers, is telling me, oh yeah, in PlayFab we have rooms in this queuing system that's already there. You just need to integrate with the API. I'm like, I wish I was building on there sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, awesome. So I would be doing us a disservice if I didn't ask you a little bit about your thoughts on Tableland. So you're talking about data backends here, and I also probably share the opinion with you that not all data needs to live in a decentralized sort of data model, but not all data is well suited for any kind of centralized API. And I'm curious, in this process of building that, have you been identifying areas of the data model that need to be broken out of the API to make this more functional? And how have you been kind of researching that, and like where have you landed in your thinking there?
Mm-hmm. So I think in terms of like, especially working with the kind of the Web3 technologies, right? In terms of, I guess, for the data models, so far our work in there is basically a lot of the traditional things. The biggest challenge I think we're having at the moment is working with an asynchronous workflow. And I think we had to do this to some degree with mana and or transactions of NFTs as well, because, you know, a lot of times a transaction will be initiated. Sorry, maybe the other way to phrase it is, in the traditional model, like when you buy something, you know, you send the request to the server, and since it's one server, not a decentralized server, it will, you know, everything's linear. First, it receives the buy request, then it knows to take your money out, and then it knows to give you the thing. Whereas sometimes in a more asynchronous workflow, we have to have someone to manage the buying essentially on the side, because I could make a buy request and then I can ping the server to say, well, how much money do I have? If it's not quite up to date yet, right, and there's a allowance of asynchronicity because of that, then I can try to buy it again, so to speak. And that presents a little, not the worst problem, but like it presents
the
a
original
challenge.
double spend problem. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, right. So like we'll have to put in extra systems to deal with that. Some ideas we have are that we can run it on a cron where, like, sure, it doesn't need to process quickly, but at least we have the list and we have a script that says if X or Y or Z certain types of requests come in, there should be some logical way to process that, right? So we do need to kind of go back to a server, so to speak, to get that that logic, at least at the moment, right? And yeah, I think, but on the flip side of the coin, I think the big thing is or the allure and the thing that is a bit understated, I would say, is that especially with Tableland, we think about the traditional need of getting a database and getting a database on the web, not just a database that sits locally on your computer that you're kind of testing with, something that's served to everybody. It's not that it takes a lot, because it might be easy for us, but like, we think about, oh, you need some type of front-end domain. Sometimes like an Azure Data Service will provide you with a hash number plus domain thing. Okay, and then you gotta spin up, pay for the service, or you have to have someone around to manage it. So I think a lot of the infrastructure and it provides is obviously, it provides a service, but it also requires a lot of people and a lot of process to kind of keep that running, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that ties in exactly with your comment almost at the top of the conversation around the allure of building some of these things because they will last. Like, yes, the idea that you can build something and then it will be there, but you actually detract from that value as soon as you introduce APIs that, yeah, like you're saying, take people to run, because those people are going to have different incentives to not be there all the time. So you need to, you got to figure that out. So yeah, sorry, I cut you off. Yeah, I didn't know thoughts, but
no,
maybe
not at all. Yeah.
Maybe Ben, like, how are you thinking about kind of the technology stack and where things decentralize versus where things speed up and centralize? Are you thinking about this, like the dual responsibilities of like a centralized stack, and then where you lean into decentralized protocols, and how you merge the two to get the best sort of experience and, features and capabilities?
It's a difficult thing, to be honest. It's a difficult thing to answer. Look, at the end of the day, there's always going to be a need for certain centralized, especially the people who come from the culture, from the decentralized culture and the DeFi culture. We want everything to be decentralized, but there's always going to be a need for that centralized kind of platforming. And it very much depends on the use case. If you talk about, I heard there's a business now that are trying to get, contracts and agreements across blockchain. And something like that will require, a more centralized stack in the background there, so to speak. So it's something that you can't really get away from. So like you said, it is an effort of trying to bring those two together and helping these decentralized platforms leverage those, with centralized platforms and vice versa.
Yeah, totally.
It's the same thing with Web3 and Web2. People are always talking about, oh, well, we're going to get rid of websites completely. It's like, well, you're not going to get rid of websites completely. There's going to be a balance of those two things. Even right now, a lot of people will hold an event, Decentraland, let's say a corporate company comes in, they hold an event. Their first thing is, well, we want links into the scene when you click objects. It's like, okay, cool. Where are those links going to go? 9 times out of 10, they're going to go to Web2 based websites. So it's always going to be a mix of those two things, from decentralized, centralized, and with Web2 and Web3.
Yeah, totally. I think we've done a good amount of work trying to figure out what are just the core tenets of the decentralized piece around, either the don't spend problem, obviously, or security, or or
security is a big one, yeah.
or financial assets or things like that.
Or governance
versus,
and oversight.
yeah, totally.
Another piece.
Totally. So like what actually needs to be owned by a user or a community versus what are the non-essentials around the edge, just that make it function faster or in a more interesting way, or whatever those things are. But yeah, really cool. So I think we're pushing an hour here of conversation. So maybe just to leave it, I made the false assumption that you were all in Toronto. Are any of you actually in Toronto?
Oh, I mean, a couple of us are. I mean, like, I think in terms of the team itself, definitely I can count at least 5 to 7 people in around Toronto, and probably a group of others in the GTA Greater Toronto area.
I got this sensation talking with your team a few times that there's sort of a Web3 thing happening in Toronto. Am I right to think that?
Absolutely.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
I'd say so.
I think we're becoming the Silicon Valley of the North. You know, there's a lot of startups and even traditional companies moving into this space. You know, there's small towns just outside Toronto, Kitchener, Waterloo, which is seeing a lot of this kind of growth of these kind of startups. And definitely more conferences and NFT conferences and Web3 related stuff popping up all over the place.
Do you know any cool ones coming up that you'll all be at that people should look out for you?
No, we're on the coattails of NFT NYC and Collision, but you know, I think there's a bunch of stuff coming up in the fall for sure. So yeah.
Cool.
I just wanted to, while I had the opportunity, actually, I saw a great one of our partners is actually in the room listening. Knots. He's the leader of the Mad Rabbits Ride Club and DeFi Society Studios. They're another one of our partners, and we've been exploring lots of ways to help develop that project and work with their amazing world builders and creative teams and on community engagement and bringing that project to the next level. They've been an invaluable partner to us. So I wanted to take a brief second to just say hey to Knots and much love to the Burrow fam.
No, it's great. You all turned us on to the Mad Rabbits project, and we've been following them since last spring, I suppose, just checking out what they're up to. And yeah, it looks like a really interesting project for sure. So cool. Where can people find you online? What are the best places to follow you?
Right. Our core website is DappHaus.io, DappHaus.io. And you could also find us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. I felt like a commercial there. I never got to say that.
That's great. People should follow you because you're always launching something new and interesting. So we'll be talking a bunch more, and if our community has any questions, we'll get those to you over in Discord. But thank you all for your time.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye, everybody.